Welcome, everybody. This is SharePoint Monthly Community Call, January 2021 edition. It is January 12th, unless I'm completely mistaken. And my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a program manager from the OneDrive SharePoint platform team, and also running the show related on a lot of our community stuff. Today, we'll have a really nice setup of kind of an update, monthly update related on SharePoint and also our community contributions across the whole Microsoft 365 community stuff. We're going to talk about slightly UserVoice. We're going to talk about SharePoint framework roadmap. I'm going to actually first time talk about what's coming in the 1.12 more explicitly. I cannot give you an exact date for it, but trust me, we're working as fast as possible to get it out because we need to show some, in quotes, love also for the SharePoint framework developers. And there's a lot of actually things happening behind the scenes, some things which we can't yet talk about, but it's going to be a really interesting spring in many ways. We're going to list all of the community contributors. So if you contributed in the past month in the GitHub or in the docs or in the samples, all of those people are being mentioned. And then we're going to do the optional picture time. And then we'll have two different demos. So first, Julie Turner from Sympraxis Consulting going to talk about the Learning Pathways 4.1 release, which is now open source solution. It is a really cool solution which actually can be integrated natively also in Microsoft Teams. So it's built using SharePoint framework, but it can be absolutely surfaced in SharePoint or in the Microsoft Teams really easily. And then Erwin van Hunen, the father of PnP PowerShell, is going to talk about the PnP PowerShell core, which is about to get released. I'm not, well, he's going to talk about the timelines of that one. But basically, now that the PnP PowerShell is on the PowerShell core, you can use it really easily in Azure Automation to automate operations in SharePoint and in the Microsoft Teams. So using that pipeline. So that's really, really good as well. And most likely, we don't have as explicit time for Q&A. So let's use the chat during the call for all of the questions. And I'll jump potentially on some of the questions which might come in if needed, but there's plenty of people answering questions in the chat. Good, let's get moving. A few traditional slides, just making sure that everybody always have these because there's always new people in the call, always new people joining on these calls. We have quite a few different channels, quite a few different assets available in the internet. For our videos, we have two different channels, the Microsoft 365 developer videos, the official one, and then we have the community videos where we have also non-development videos available, but also development videos. So it's slightly confusing historical reasons why we have two of them. We are in progress of kind of trying to figure out how do we combine these or what's going to happen. Then we have a lot of open source assets available in the GitHub, multiple different locations for them. We have sample galleries. We're working on a unified Microsoft 365 sample gallery going to be released later this spring. So you can go to one location and then search for Microsoft Teams Graph built with SPFx or non-SPFx or a SaaS in Azure, and you'll find the sample available across all of the different locations. If you're looking into all of there's a lot of URLs, if you're looking into or getting confused on the assets, AKMS M365 PnP on the right side, the last URL is the one where you have community call details, components, SDKs, tooling, all of that being listed in one location. So super easy location to remember. Now, a quick update on the UserVoice. Not that much actually progress on the UserVoice on the non-dev area on the UserVoice side. So I just wanted from a let's say balance perspective, we're going to mention the non-dev stuff here as well, even though traditionally this call was always about the development. But enable renaming of a SharePoint Online tenant domain. I can quickly maybe, I'm not going to give you any timelines for that one, but that is actually being actively worked on. I know for a fact that we've been already piloting that with some customers, so we are bringing the renaming of SharePoint Online tenants relatively soon. I'm not going to give you a date again because I can, because if I promise that to happen by end of this month, and that will not happen by end of this month, you will be angry. So I'm being super careful and not giving you dates. But a lot of this stuff is getting worked on, and there's some traditional things like the 5,000 item, which is actively being worked on for sure. But enabling SPO tenant rename, I know for a fact that we're already piloting that with some of our customers. So I know that there's customers out there who would like to rename their tenant. Now, on the dev side of the house, not that much progress. Maybe one thing what I wanted to call out, the first one, please keep on voting on that one. We are having continuous discussion on finally getting the SPFx forms for lists, which is really cool capability if we can finally get a permission to do that from our side. And then I want to call out the number 6, which is partly actually being addressed in the Microsoft Craft Toolkit. So if you're familiar with the Microsoft Craft Toolkit version 2 release, there is a person card capability inside of it. So it might be that we can actually close this one because the live persona card, which is one of the options of having this one, is only designed to be used by a first party. But since the Craft Toolkit has the persona card, which is looking exactly the same, behaving exactly the same, or at least close, you can actually achieve the same outcome from there. If David or somebody has a link to the Craft Toolkit, please put it in the chat. So just for those as a reference. Now, David, I think you're ready to go and do a quick update on the following slide, which is around our AKMS Sharing is Caring initiative.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Vesa. As an inclusive and open source community, PnP welcomes all types of contributions. And those contributions come in the form of contributing back through documentation or code samples. Sometimes they're using and sharing some of the resources that we have available, showing others how they can be used. But we understand that there's a degree of complexity that comes with that, a degree of fear that can be had if you're not comfortable with some of those mechanisms like GitHub and forking, etc. Sharing is Caring is an initiative that leads you through that with hands-on guidance sessions where we walk you through, we do it together and show you how to contribute, how to take advantage of being able to submit community docs, how to set up your workstation, how to use samples using Node Version Manager and dealing with all the different versions of Node and NVM, and a lot more is going to be added this year in 2021. Hugo and I run it. We're adding April Dunham to the team, and so congratulations, and we're excited to have April there. We're also starting out a new Ask Me Anything. This is going to be monthly. Today's session, or Ask Me Anything, is going to happen today, 1 hour after the end of this call, 10 a.m. Pacific time. I'll post the link in the chat. You can join it. There's a direct Teams link on the Sharing is Caring landing page that you can just join the Teams call and ask any questions. Mark Anderson and Malia Mancini will be there. The community docs SMEs will be there to answer any questions. We'll have another one next month, and the guest will be the PnP JS team. So we're looking forward to that. So the monthly call next month, 1 hour after that, will be the AMA for PnP JS. New design coming soon in office hours, so be sure to look at all the new changes that are coming up. We welcome everyone. They're all free of charge, and we would love to see you. Tessa, back to you.
Excellent, David. Just to recap on that one, so we want to make sure that when we have new people coming into the community and new people learning how to build stuff in Microsoft 365, they have a way of easily onboarding to learn how to consume all of this stuff. And that's what the Sharing is Caring initiative is all about. So, of course, if you're more advanced, maybe you don't want to join on this, but if you're interested, why not? If you're not familiar with NVM, as an example, join the call, and Hugo and David is going to explain what's that all about. Now, a few kind of recycling slides, which we always have on this monthly call. PnP Weekly, the latest one actually came out today with Louis Fries. So we're back on track of doing PnP Weeklies. One note on this one, if you're writing an article as a blog post or as a note or something, please send a hashtag with the hashtag PnP Weekly, so we can actually cover that in the recording as well, and we'll call it out in the blog post and articles. So because we want to make sure that whatever community write as a blog post are being surfaced in multiple different locations. AKMS PnP Weekly, and for the video, and PnP Weekly Podbean as a podcast. We also have a Microsoft 365 developer podcast run by Jeremy Thake and Paul Scheffelin from Adding 365. Really great podcast as well, really concentrating more on the developer side of the house. And the PnP Weekly is a more dev, including non-dev, and also concentrating on MVPs and the community people and all of that. Now, I promised to do some updates on the SPFx. So quick update on the SPFx. We're locking in the 1.12 release right now. I don't want to promise you a date because there are certain technical nuances which we are still to be clarified. But in 1.12, for SharePoint Framework, which is planned to get out relatively soon, we're planning to have a Node 14 support with Gulf 4 support, something which is way outdated. We acknowledge that, and we need to actually work on that and get it up to date. We also want to have a more access on base structure and context-aware DOM dependency requirements, and this basically means that you will have As a web part, you can have web part width or events when a web part width is being adjusted. For example, moving from a section to another on a page, you will get an event that the width has been adjusted. So you can actually more efficiently adjust on the width of the web part, what you're rendering inside of the panel. On the Microsoft Teams side, which is a big focus area for SharePoint Framework as well, we will include embedding Microsoft Teams manifest inside of the SPFx file. So rather than auto-generating the manifest as part of the sync to Teams, you are able to provide your own Microsoft Teams manifest as part of the SPFx file, and then we'll use that one. Relatively simple thing. And then we are adding also the Microsoft Teams meeting apps support, which are being then built with SharePoint Framework. So making it super easy to extend the Microsoft Teams meetings by then having you exposing functionalities and capabilities over there. But yes, Laurent, Node 14 is the target. And yes, it's the Node 14 point whatever is the current version. So yes, and yes, we know we should have actually had that one way past, but now we're focusing on making that happen in 1.12. So that's not going to be released unless we get the V14 included. We do apologize on the delay on that one, but there are constant improvements on this area. There's a lot of actually investments happening behind the scenes, which we cannot unfortunately talk about yet. We need to still wait a few more weeks, few more months with certain bigger announcements, which will be exciting for the future of SharePoint Framework as well. Now, on the updates from the monthly community side, yesterday, today is Tuesday. Yesterday, we released the January 2021 update. So we have a blog post available in the developer blog where we call out all of the updated Microsoft Teams samples and all of the updated SharePoint Framework samples, and also all of the contributors and companies who've been involved on helping on this journey. So thank you for all of those people. And going through all of the people who've been contributing, and this is all of the people who've been contributing on the Microsoft 365 GitHub or the documentation within a past month, so within a December 2020. And not going to obviously mention all of these people, but we want to be in this together. And the whole point of this PnP and community engagement is that you have a way to contribute, you have a way to tell us what's missing, and we have this direct channel where you can freely also complain of what's missing, and then we'll get that feedback and we're able to address that within the Microsoft. So we do want to work together with our MVPs and with community on addressing gaps and also knowing what's important for you. So thank you everybody for your contributions as well, as a sample or as a documentation update or whatever have you been contributing. And that's from A to G, and then this is from K to Y, and the list of people who've been contributing within the past month. Now, as expected, this is slightly smaller list than in November because the holiday season was happening, which is good. People were prioritizing family. I think it's super important thing as well. And these are the companies who we have a permission to show as part of the slides. So the people in the previous slides are working for this group of companies or companies which we don't have a permission to show the logo. So these are the companies who give their employees the opportunity of contributing to the open source and to the community work. If you are contributing and you want your company logo to be visible here, please let us know and give us the permission to do that. Otherwise, we're unable to do that. So if you contribute, give us the permission to show the logo as well. But thank you everybody for your contributions, for the GitHub and documentation and open source and community efforts, because we are in this together. And like I said, we need to understand from you what's needed and what's possible and what are the things, what is missing, so we can actually address those gaps. We built Microsoft 365 for you. Not otherwise. You are our customer, so we need to know what's needed. Now, from the Microsoft side, this is the group of people who also been active from Microsoft side. A lot of people, either consultants, PMs, engineers, or PFEs, the customer engineers nowadays, apparently, who've been active on the past month as well. So thank you for the Microsoft employees who've been involved as well. And then we do a quick picture time. So let's see if we can actually make this work this time. I will actually flip myself to the together mode and I will share the screen. I can see a lot of people enabling the video. Everybody is waiting when it's happening. So let's see if we can actually make this happen. And there we go. And let me actually update the scene slightly. I think I can still do that. Hopefully it doesn't break. Don't break. Please don't break. Oh, I can see you. I want to update the picture. 1 second. Well, now you're pretty much in the gray area. Let's do a picture out of that quickly. Order. This is going to be a slightly gray, slightly gray out picture, but I'm going to quickly record some of the people waving hands because we can still see you. And here we go. And let's wave. Thank you, everybody. It's great to see the faces. I think a lot of the people across the world are still in a lockdown and making visible, and Chris behave on the back row, and making this people visible here is really great. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for that. Sorry for the gray area. I will learn for the next one. So thank you. Thank you. Good. And let's see if I can actually get rid of the status. There we go. You can still see my screen, so that should be working fine. The next thing what we have on the schedule, and right on time, actually, which is great, is our demos. So we have 2 demos coming up today. First with Julie Turner from Sympraxis Consulting, talk about learning pathways, the new version out of that, which is also an open source solution. So how to get started on it, how does it actually work? And then Erwin van Hunen is going to talk about the future of PnP PowerShell. He's going to talk about the timelines of that one. But Julie, I think we are jumping on your screen.
All right, so I'm here today talking about Microsoft 365 learning pathways, and mostly what I'm going to be focusing on is the open source updates we did right before Christmas, or the holiday break, excuse me. Just quickly, my name is Julie Turner. I'm partner CTO with Sympraxis Consulting. Here are multiple different ways to get a hold of me, but primarily today I'm going to be talking about learning pathways, which has its own GitHub repo. So what I want to point out is some changes that we made to the repository structure with this release. So previously, all our source code was not provided, and that was a conscious decision by Microsoft that we wanted to work on the code base and get it really stable before we released it. So some changes that were made with this release is that we updated our repo to have the main name instead of master. The docs folder is always where all our manifests for the content, the lists and everything live. Images were always there. Installation used to be called web part. So that installation folder is where you're going to find the precompiled solution package, as well as manual installation scripts and some other scripts for fixing things up. Newly added is the source folder, and so I'll go into more detail on that in a few moments. But the source folder is where all the styling and the web part source code lives. What I want to talk about today is, because we've open sourced the solution, I want to talk about quickly the contribution guidelines that we're going to have on the repository. So we are not going to accept any pull requests on that docs folder. So that docs folder is where Microsoft's manifests of playlists and assets live. And because of the shared nature of that repository, we're not going to be accepting pull requests on that. Microsoft will manage those lists, and so anyone who does a pull request on that, I will just close it down. And we'll be thinking about that and reviewing that, and we may change that policy later, but for now, that is the stance we're going to take. We want you to target all your pull requests to the dev branch. That way, we can fully test and integrate them before we move them into the master branch and release them. So please target your updates to the dev branch. Also, kind of keep your pull requests fairly simple, right? Give me a great overview of what you changed and in as much detail as possible, so it makes it quicker for me to review it and hopefully get it in and rolled into the solution. And if you have an idea for a big change, we're certainly open to that, but please submit an enhancement request idea so that we can chat about it ahead of time and make sure that the solution that you're proposing is something that's going to fit into the overall architecture of the solution. So then back to the source code. That source code folder has 2 main folders in it, the style guide folder and the web part folder. So the development team was comprised of myself and Stefan Bauer. And Stefan Bauer built this style guide solution that basically is a web app that runs that shows you all the component parts of all the design components within Learning Pathways solution. So the style guide is its own solution, and the SCSS that lives in there gets imported or pulled into the web part code, source code on build time. So the web part folder then has our SharePoint framework solutions inside of it. And so from that perspective, we have this directory structure underneath it. So we have the custom learning web part, which is the viewer web part. We have the custom learning admin web part, which is the admin UI. And we have a set of common code as well as a couple of reusable controls that sort of sit outside the structure. The file picker for picking the images for the custom playlist and custom subcategories, as well as a recursive tree control that I built to be able to pick what subcategory or category playlists sit in when you're using the UI. Okay, so that's all I had for slides. So let me shut down my PowerPoint situation here. Boop. And let's take a look at the source code. So again, we have the GitHub repo here. And like I said, we have that docs folder, and inside that we have, you know, the learning pathways, playlist, and content for V4 and V3. They sit in here, as well as the SharePoint Success Kit. Okay, so we have that docs folder. That's where all the manifests live. And then again, I showed the source code. This is that style guide app, and this is the web part code. And again, this is just SharePoint Framework solution. So if you're familiar with building for SharePoint Framework, you know, all of this is what you would expect. Okay, so this is where that source code lives. And again, you know, if you have some ideas or whatever, feel free to get started and help make the solution even better. Okay, so then the other thing we wanted to talk about was the Microsoft Teams integration. So one of the things we're going to be doing in the future, and Vesa mentioned this earlier, is that the 1.12 version of the SharePoint framework is going to have a couple of features in it that we kind of have been waiting for. So from a styling perspective, there's some things that Stefan did to make the viewer web part behave nicely in the different locations on the page. So if you're in a 1/3 section, or if you're in a full bleed section or wherever, the web part behaves nicely in that. He did some work that is, you know, a little hacky at best, but it was our only solution. With the 1.12 version of SharePoint Framework, we're going to be able to revisit that and hopefully make that a lot more solid. So that will be something that's coming in the next few months after the 1.12 SharePoint Framework release. The other thing that the 1.12 version of the SharePoint Framework gives us is the ability to put a more complex Teams manifest in the solution. So in the source code, we'd be able to bundle in a manifest that's more complex. What that more complex manifest is going to allow us to do, so I'm going to demo right now. So we have the learning pathway solution, and when we go to the viewer web part, if people are familiar with this, we have the ability to deep link into the web part. So if I go into one of these playlists, I can click my link button, and it's going to give me a link to because I'm on the viewer web part page, it's going to give me a link back to that page, but with deep linking in it, so it comes right back to this location. What we've done with the 4.1 release was that we added Teams deep linking. So when you have added the Teams manifest for a private app for Teams, and you're in the Teams solution and you click the link, it actually recognizes that you're in Teams and gives the deep linking context that's needed, so that if you use this URL, if I copy this URL and I paste it over in here, it's gonna deep link back into that same location in the Teams app. Yada, yada, yada. Load, 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 load. There we go. So it comes back to that same location. So that feature, we're going to be able to release more officially with the 1.12 release, but I will be sharing the manifest that I used for this so that others can take advantage of that manifest and manually deploy it in Teams. So that is a new thing that I will be deploying shortly within the next couple of weeks. I think that's about all that I wanted to share about that. So that was all I had. Is there anything else you want me to cover, Vesa?
Yes, Julie. Can you briefly explain what is the learning pathways and why people would actually care about it? Let's not assume that everybody in the call actually remembers what it is and are familiar with it.
Yeah. So learning pathways is it's a set of web parts. There are 2 web parts in the solution that surface through an iframe technology documents from support.office.com or docs.microsoft.com combined together into a playlist of content to help people learn things. So this is the home of the content, and we have different categories of content. So like a getting started, your first days using Microsoft Office 365, or recommended playlists, and we have content and playlists for products like Word and Excel, content about like how to do rows and columns, for instance. And once we get into that content, we have playlists that walk us through each of these tasks that we might need to do. Now, the viewer web part that you can use can be put in any site collection, can be added as an app into any of the site collections in your tenant, and then you can inline learning content in with the rest of your content. So it's a way to basically distribute learning in through your tenant and reuse content that is hosted right in the central location. So we have the Learning Pathways Administration web part that I mentioned earlier that helps us basically go through and decide what we want to show and what we want to hide, as far as like which playlists. And there's also the ability to go through and show and hide different technologies, like maybe you have not implemented Teams or PowerPoint or Yammer, for instance, and you want to hide all Yammer content from the solution. You can do that. And so then it also allows us to use other solutions such as the SharePoint Success Site. So the SharePoint Success Site is what's called a new content pack, and it has learnings and playlists managed by a team at Microsoft just around SharePoint. And so this content you can also add into your content set for learning pathways. To provision learning pathways, you can do it in a couple different ways. One way is to use the lookbook site. I think I might have that memorized. Lookbook.microsoft.com. So you can go to the lookbook.microsoft.com, and there is solutions for learning pathways. And I guess this is probably small. So let me zoom in a little bit. So we can go into the solutions and then Microsoft Learning Pathways. And if you are a global tenant admin, you can provision learning pathways into your solution by adding it into your tenant once you've signed in. But you do have to be a global tenant admin because this is going to deploy web parts into your solution gallery. So you have to be a global tenant admin. That's the security level you need. If that's a problem for you, we have documentation in our GitHub site about how to manually deploy learning pathways. So you don't have to actually provision the site collection. You can add a site collection manually and then provision learning pathways in. You won't get the template pages that are just sort of like getting started pages, but they're not necessary to run the solution. So that's how you get started with learning pathways. And then I did mention the SharePoint Success Kit, so I'll just point it out here. The SharePoint Success Kit is an add-on content pack and site collection for learning pathways. A prerequisite is that you've already deployed learning pathways into your tenant, but then you can go to the SharePoint Success site template and deploy that into your solution. You will want to, before you do this, watch this very short video. It's like a 4-minute video that just gives you the step-by-step on how to provision it, because there is a little bit of a trick. You have to add that content pack that I was showing over here. This content pack has to be added manually in, so you need to do that final step or the solution won't work.
Cool. That's a really good summary. There's a great question, by the way, from Wayne related on your demo. Can you set a learning path for a particular user profile? So can you do a targeted learning paths for a new employees, as an example, versus just showing everything?
Oh, for sure. So like, I think what you're saying is like, if you had like we have this playlist that I had from a different demo, so luckily it's just right here. We had this customized, so we took this 6 simple steps, welcome to Microsoft 365 that Microsoft built. We made a copy of it because it's a feature of the admin center, and we made a custom playlist called welcome to your first week at Acme company, whatever. Then the playlist is a combination of Microsoft provided assets and our custom assets, which are just pages in the site, right? So we made custom pages on, enrolling your mobile app or creating an email signature. So that custom content, then you can take this content and maybe if I get wicked lucky, I can find Acme HR. Oh my God, really? Seriously? Oh, sweet. I did find it, Acme HR. And so if we go to this Acme HR site, we can see that we have a custom human resources site where we have this welcome to your first week at Acme link. And that link has the playlist embedded right in it with some extra content that we just put on the left-hand pane. So you can absolutely drive your users to this content specifically. So it's not audience targeted in that way, although this is just a page in SharePoint, and so of course you could secure it or email it or create a news feed on it. Lots of different ways to use SharePoint to make that content get to your users in the way that best works for them. Does that help answer the question?
That's helped. Yeah, absolutely helped. So that's a really good. And just to recap, the Learning Pathways is a free solution, helping every single company in the world to help to train their employees easily. So it is really targeted for providing answers directly inside of your intranet. So surfacing that Microsoft support material and guidance and videos and all of that inside of your intranet so that people can easily find it. So that's what it's intended to use. Anything what I'm missing there related on objective perspective? No. That was a good way of putting that then. Okay, cool. Yep. Thank you, Julie. Now, so that we don't run out of time, and we might have a time for Q&A, let's see, and depending on how Erwin's timeline is today, Erwin can talk for hours and hours and hours related on PowerShell, for sure. But let's jump, Erwin, on your topic. So you're going to talk about the PnP PowerShell, where we are with that one, and how we can easily use it in Azure Functions with the PowerShell core.
Correct. Okay, I will actually not show that much running in PowerShell, the shell itself today. But yeah, PnP PowerShell, new version. Confusingly enough, we have a new version of PnP PowerShell, which is also called PnP PowerShell. So we have an old version or a legacy version, as we refer to it, and the new version. And the legacy version is what most of you are using today. If you use PnP PowerShell, the ones with a very complex naming, SharePoint PnP PowerShell, online SharePoint PnP PowerShell 2013, 2016, etc. We renamed the package to PnP.PowerShell. Very simple. There is a big change in this, that the new PnP PowerShell only works for SharePoint Online. So what will happen with the old PowerShell if you run on-prem? Well, we will not release any new versions anymore of that. We will not remove it, though. It will stay on the PowerShell gallery for the rest of time, but there will be no bug fixes happening. Now, for the on-prem environment, there is not much happening on the on-prem environment itself doesn't update that often itself, so bug fixes are maybe not that relevant for the on-prem environment. If you run SharePoint Online, we strongly urge you to move over to the new version, PnP.PowerShell. That one has quite a lot of interesting new functionality. For instance, it runs on basically every PowerShell version that you know of. It runs on PowerShell 7 core, that's the one you're looking at here. It runs on Linux, it runs on Mac, and it runs even in the old built-in Windows PowerShell, the one with the blue background. So because we built it on .NET Core and .NET Standard, it also means you can actually run it in an Azure function. In the old days, you had to revert an Azure function to V1 to be able to run PowerShell in your Azure function. That functionality is gone from Azure. You cannot revert the runtime back to V1 anymore, so you were limited. Now, with the new PowerShell, you can, because the new PowerShell runs in PowerShell 7. and that is PowerShell also the PowerShell they offer in Azure Functions. So if you create a new function app, what you have to do is in the runtime stack, select PowerShell core. It will select 7. There is no other option than 7. So you just pick this and then you click next and all the steps that you do. So I did it already. And here an Azure function app. And here you see a function, and we'll go a bit into that later. So now there are articles out there, even on docs.microsoft.com, that explain on how to get PnP PowerShell in your function to be able to use it. That became much easier now. So what you first have to do is you have to go to app files here. And it will load a couple of files in the user interface if the user interface is responding. I'm still on a very slow connection. There we go. And here you can select requirements PSD1. If you switch to that file, you see that by default, there is this entry in there, AZ or AZ 5.star. These are the Azure commandlets. For now, I just marked them out. I'm not going to use them. And here I added a new entry, PnP.PowerShell. That's the package name. And here's the version you're using. And right now, we're releasing every night a new version. That is, if there is a change. If there's nothing in the code base that has changed, we will not release a new version. But this is a fully automated process. So if there's any changes happening in PowerShell or one of the underlying PnP modules that we make use of, then there will be a new nightly build. So every day, most of the times, there's every day a new nightly build. Until we release the 1.0, you will have to fully specify the version number here. So you cannot do the wildcard trick here. That is a limitation they chose to apply to this for security reasons, they said. So you cannot use wildcards on pre-released versions. But the moment PnP PowerShell has been fully released, you can just write here 1.star. And then it will automatically update for you the latest available released version. But until that time is there, which will be later this week, you will have to fully specify the version. So that is one step. Now, I marked out these Azure command lists because I know already that I am not going to use them. So I marked them out. If you mark them out, you'll have to make another change. You have to go to the profile PSD1 file. Yes, I would like to change the file. Here you see this little entry is normally marked out, enabled like this. These are using the Azure commandlets. And we're not going to use them, we don't have them available. So I marked them out too, this little part of the code. So that's it. And when I'm done with these two files, I can start to create my function. So here's my function. I go to code and test. And it's a very simple function. It's purely for demo reasons. And what I'm doing here is, and I'll get back to these marked out lines here. But first, I retrieve the password. The password I entered in my function app as an environment variable, as a variable. So I retrieve that one here as a password. Those are, once you add them, you cannot view them anymore. So they're relatively secure. But there's other ways to do it. You can, of course, also connect with certificates and all kinds of other tricks you want to use. But for now, I use the username and password combination. I create a new credential object here. And then here's where basically PnP PowerShell kicks in. So I say connect to my site with these credentials. And here I'm using something that is brand new to PnP PowerShell, and that's batching. And we're actually quite happy and pretty proud of that. So the way it works is this. I create a new batch. New PnP batch. Then I loop. This is generating basically 500 new items. So I'm looping through a loop of 500 times, and I add a new list item to this list, and I set the title field to title 1, title 2, title 3, title 4. But then I tell the commandlet, add list item, to add that to this batch. And when it's done, I say, okay, you're done adding it. That will take just a few seconds. Invoke that batch, execute that batch. So basically the difference is, if I would not use the batch parameter here, it would basically create an item and then create a new item and create a new item and create a new item. It will do a lot of processing behind the scenes. For instance, for convenience reasons, you see that the list parameter there, I wrote batch test. That's the title of the list But what happens behind the scenes is that we actually look up the list by title. And then because we need the ID of the list behind the scenes, so we do a lookup. So we do another request to the server and figure out what the title is, the IDs of that list. And so there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes in this add PnP list item, a lot of requests happening. And that could mean that, for instance, adding a single item would mean at least 5 or 6 normal requests. Now with batching, we're a bit more intelligent. We only figure out that list one time, and then we store it in a local cache. So that request is already done as a one-time extra call. And then we add these items to the batch. And behind the scenes, they're all recorded. And when you invoke them, the code looks at the size of the batch and sees like, okay, it's less than 100 items. I will send that as one request off to the server. And the server will start to process and create those items. If there are more than 100, the system behind the scenes will break it up in batches of 100. So there will be separate batches. So it's 500 items. There will be 5 requests going to the server, each containing 100 items to be created. The speed difference is incredible. We did some testing and a simple execution of running 500 items with the classic way on my slow 4G connection that I have here. Takes like at least 3-4 minutes. And when I do that with the batching manner, we're less than a minute. So the speed difference is incredible. If you run it on a normal network connection that you have at home, like with fiber, we're talking about seconds. So the speed increase is incredible. Now, what I do more in this commandlet, I also say, give me the number of teams. So this commandlet will then output, okay, create 500, sorry, this Azure function will output, create me 500 items, and you have so many teams in your environment currently. So let's run this one. So what you will see is that the moment the function is starting, there's this yellow text there, it says, hey, I'm going to download now PnP PowerShell for you. That's effectively what it's doing. It's downloading it from the PowerShell gallery, installing it in your environment, and when it's done installing, it will start to execute the Azure function. In the meantime, here, I have that list open on the side so that I have nothing open my sleeves here. So it's an empty list. There's nothing in there. Let's see where we are here. So the initial run will always take a bit of time. But they said that also. Now, any subsequent runs, it will reuse the module that is already available in your Azure function. If you restart the function app, that cache gets cleared. So there's some cases which are described also on docs.microsoft.com where this cache gets cleared. So it's running now, it's triggering. It's creating the batch, adding the items to the batch, which is just, again, a few seconds. And then it's invoking that batch. It's breaking up the batch in requests. So if you go here, you see it's already started. There we have already like, so the automatic updating of the screen of the list, which is a nice feature, is going a bit crazy now because there's so many items being added at the same time. So you jump back to 30, now it's at 99, and we scroll down. And because we're adding so many items, they were done. So now we created 500 items and we have 9 teams. That's the result of the Azure function. It's very simple and very easy to use now in your, it's very easy way to create Azure functions without writing C# code, anything, just PowerShell. Very simple to use. Now, we are aware of the fact that we make use of behind the scenes code assemblies that sometimes conflict. Now, without going into much detail how those conflicts occur, it's a known thing in the PowerShell world that if a module uses a assembly or a DLL behind the scenes, and you try to use another module that uses another version of that same assembly, you will get a conflict. That is just an unfortunate side effect of how PowerShell has been designed. And we noticed recently that the Azure functions commandlets use a different version of an assembly that we also use in PnP PowerShell. And there's a way around that. And the way around it is by actually running this in a separate thread, separate box. And that's very simple in PowerShell to do too. So I'm marking out these lines here. So basically what happens now is I create a script block. So basically, this code is not being executed the moment I run the script, at least not here. It's just loading everything into this variable called script block. And then I say, start a job with that script block and run the job and wait until you're done. And output then that result in the teams count. So if I can do here. So I have to return the teams count. So the last statement is what is being returned to the call here. So this is a way of basically creating, so you can actually do multi-threading with this. You could, if you know already upfront that you run multiple things at the same time and you don't care about the output, you start multiple thread jobs. So this is a very nice way. And this way it runs basically in its own, like, think of it as a sandbox. It's not completely a sandbox, but it runs in its own thread. It's not being conflicting with the Azure commandlets in this case. Now, this is all documented. We all wrote this down. And I have a couple of slides, or not a couple of slides, actually I have one slide where you can see a couple of links that I want to point out. So one of them is the top one. This is the documentation site for PowerShell, where you find a bunch of articles about installing, upgrading, what has changed, how to do authentication, because that has changed considerably in the new PowerShell. So read that article about authentication, and also how to use, for instance, secret management, which is a module we promote, which is created by Microsoft to handle, for instance, username and passwords. And we also how to do batching and how to create Azure functions with PnP PowerShell. It's all described in there. So the second URL is where the code resides. So that's the new repository. And the third line is how to install it. Notice the allow pre-release. If that doesn't work on your machine, if you run PowerShell 5 and the install module commandlet doesn't provide you with an allow pre-release option, it means you have an older version of PowerShell Get installed, which comes out of the box with PowerShell 5. You will have to upgrade that one. Just Google up or Bing upgrade PowerShell Get, and you will be redirected to a page at docs.microsoft.com where they will explain to you how to install the new version of PowerShell Get. And the last one is the Twitter account for PnP PowerShell, the official Twitter account for PnP PowerShell. So follow that one and you will be up to date when we do something and changes.
So thank you, Erwin, on that one. Really cool demo as well. A lot of chats happening on the chat window, and maybe we'll get you back sooner or later to talk about other development in the PowerShell side as well. These calls are quite always, how would I put it, pretty fast actually. So we don't get to deep dive on the exact content, unfortunately, because we have a limited time on our hands. But thank you, Julie, and thank you answering on the questions. I saw a lot of answers on the questions. Thank you, Erwin, on a great demo as well. And that's basically now enabling the use automation in SharePoint online in Microsoft Teams using the Azure functions in Azure in a GA mode, so to say, in Azure function. Is that the right way of using the term, Erwin? Just out of curiosity. Yep. Were you listening? Yes, you were.
Yeah, I was muted. I had to unmute, and it's always looking for the button.
Well, yeah. Just to recap on the timelines. What's the timeline related on getting the new PnP PowerShell, which is named exactly the same as the old PnP PowerShell, but now with the better capabilities? End of this week.
End of this week. Yeah.
So within upcoming days.
Bert and I are not 100% sure yet if it will be Thursday or Friday, but one of those days.
And we'll release a blog post, and obviously we'll talk about that in LinkedIn, in Facebook, and in Twitter and social media. So you are able to then catch up when the 1.0 version of PnP PowerShell, the new one, is available. Yep. We still have a few minutes. There's quite a few questions. We can still see active discussion. Thank you, Bert, also answering on the questions on the chat, helping on incoming questions. We still have a few more minutes. Did I miss any questions related on SPFx, which we can still go through on there? Raymond is saying new PowerShell looks really cool. I do agree on that one. It's good to get all of the stuff modernized. Can anyone please provide some guidance on throttling when we use PnP patching?
As Bert is here, maybe Bert can unmute, because behind the scenes we're using the core SDK, which actually takes care of a lot of the plumbing of the batching in PowerShell.
Yeah, putting Bert on.
Yeah.
Bert?
Yeah, so we the Chorus K handles the batching, and we follow the guidelines, the rules that there are for batching. So if the batching uses graph, we'll kind of group with maximum 20. If it sees some, we group with 100, and we kind of automatically under the covers handle everything for you, essentially. So you can do like a batch of 1,000, and we split up in 10 separate 100 item batches, process them and give the results back, and so on. So yeah. If that was the question.
Yeah, that was most likely precisely the question. So if you're heading, let's say 50,000, are creating 50,000 items, how do you as a consumer of the code need to think about splitting it? And the answer is no. All of that is happening behind the scenes automatically. So you are automatically splitting it into smaller batches.
With PnP Chorus K, and you can even mix and match a graph request. Well, PnP Chorus K kind of is an API that under the cover uses either graph or REST, or even some CSOM sometimes. But you can just mix and match things. You don't have to know it anymore, and we just handle it automatically.
Yeah. Yep. There's a good question here from Will, how exceptions are handled with batching. Actually, we talked about that today. So
that's a good one.
That is currently, well, as of tomorrow of the PnP Nightly, it's handled in such a way that when in one item in the batch throws an exception, the rest of the batch will still be executed. We will list you the exceptions after the batch has been executed. If you use the PnP Core SDK yourself from code, you can decide the behavior. You can say throw an exception the moment it encounters an exception, it will just immediately throw it. Or you can say execute the rest of the batch, and then you will have to parse the results for any exceptions in there.
Yep, you'll get the actual API call that you made with the corresponding exception that happened for that one call.
Yeah, which is actually the fact that you can define, is it going to break immediately or is it going to just jump over the one, is really great, because for those who are not aware and don't remember, SharePoint is not transactional, so we cannot cancel all of the operations which have been already executed. So having that option of breakout or then executing the rest of the lines makes perfect sense. So really cool stuff. Good, we are running out of time. Unfortunately, we'll follow up on the questions if there's anything which we did miss after the call as well. Just to recap, the recording will be available within 24 hours in the Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel in AKMS M365 videos. And the next community call is happening this week, which is the SharePoint Framework community calls. We'll have 3 demos coming up on Thursday, January 14th. The next Microsoft 365 channel dev community call is a week from now. So every single Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific time, we'll have this recurrent call for these. And then the next SharePoint monthly call happens on February 9th. And it seems to be that we'll have Melissa Torres to talk about App Launch Bar and the latest on hub sites, which is really cool. We'll get that one confirmed with Melissa. We also have plenty of other calls as well. The easiest way to actually access the list of all of these calls is to go AKMS M365 Dev Calls or AKMS M365 PnP. Either way, you'll find all of the details related on these calls. And you can choose which one you want to choose, which one you want to join and see live, and which one you want to see as a recording. But again, thank you everybody for joining today. Thank you for a lively discussion in the chat. It's always good to have the excitement and the answers, questions and answers happening in the chat, which is super, super helpful. Please remember, keep the feedback coming. If something is missing, something isn't working, let us know. Be patient, but keep on repeating. We'll get it to you, absolutely. But we need to know if something is broken. So please keep on having the feedback submitted towards us. But have a great rest of the Tuesday, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Erwin. Thank you, Julie. Cheers. Bye-bye.